My wife agreed to the divorce without hesitation, and before I could process it, the divorce papers arrived at my doorstep while I was stationed overseas. Shocked, I immediately called my wife, Lucy, who was adamant about the decision. "That's right," she said coldly. "I'll be seeking a substantial amount of alimony. It's your fault for constantly neglecting our family." To my dismay, my beloved daughter, Hazel, chimed in, "That's correct, Daddy. You have to take responsibility." Hearing Hazel's side with Lucy deeply wounded me. "This will make our lives easier," Lucy added, almost sounding like she relished in tormenting me. Little did she know, I had a plan. To swiftly obtain a divorce, move abroad, and transfer everything into her name. My name is George, and I'm a 55-year-old salesman currently leading the sales department at a prominent trading company. Much like my father, who also worked in sales, I spent a significant portion of my childhood overseas, which allowed me to become fluent in 5 languages. After high school, I moved in with my grandparents and attended a prestigious university. Following in my father's footsteps, I joined a trading company, aspiring to become a globe-trotting salesman. I had numerous employment options, but I chose my current organization due to its active involvement in global trade. Despite obstacles like the economic downturn following the bubble's burst and the stock market crash during the Lehman crisis, I managed to achieve remarkable results. The recent pandemic severely impacted the global economy, but we're gradually recovering. Overseas business trips have resumed, and as the sales head, I frequently travel for crucial negotiations. "Another trip, huh?" Lucy remarked sarcastically as I packed for my next journey. "This one might take a while," I responded calmly, "and I'm counting on you to take care of the house." Lucy smirked, turned away, and left the room. After finishing my packing, I headed to the living room for a break, only to overhear Lucy's discontented voice. "He's making a big show of packing by himself. So passive-aggressive." "Well, it's better if he doesn't need our help, isn't it?" Hazel replied in a conciliatory tone. I sighed, took a few steps back, and cleared my throat before entering the room. "Oh, Dad, are you all ready?" Hazel asked, reaching out to me, but Lucy remained silent, sulking as she turned away. "I'm ready to go," I declared. "Early departure is on the cards tomorrow. This journey will be a lengthy one." I prepared some coffee and returned to my quarters. Lucy and I have occupied separate bedrooms for almost 2 decades. She held seniority over me at the company, working the front desk. With her captivating appearance and effortless charm, she was the center of attention. Men from all corners flocked to her, desperate to capture her affection. Hailing from abroad, I lacked experience with women. I preferred the company of my high school and university friends, never having a romantic partner. To Lucy, I must have seemed like a mere child, undeserving of her time. Yet, as a newcomer, I gained recognition as a promising prospect, inadvertently becoming a sort of celebrity. One day, when I visited the reception, Lucy covertly handed me a hairpin with her phone number inscribed. Most would have been elated, but I was so engrossed in my work that I could not fathom the company's star bestowing such attention upon me. Thus, I disregarded her gesture. On her way home from work, she unexpectedly confronted me and insisted we go to a restaurant. While sipping her wine, she directly asked, "George, do you have a girlfriend?" Feeling nervous, I replied, "No, I'm too focused on learning the job right now." "Ah, you're so serious. But I've heard the executives have high hopes for you. You're talented and multilingual. A true rising star," she said, gazing at me with admiring eyes. I tried to downplay it, saying, "Speaking multiple languages is common here." "And your humility, too. You're truly remarkable," she remarked. Her words didn't particularly move me, but they seemed to inspire something in her. After several more shared meals, we somehow found ourselves in an approved relationship at the company. As my business trips abroad became more frequent, Lucy was always delighted. It's amazing you're taking solo international trips after just 1 year. You're definitely executive material, she'd say, her eyes shining with pride. In time, I grew to genuinely love Lucy, and after 3 years, I proposed. I'm so thrilled, she said. I'll be by your side, ready to uplift and back you up, she'd assured, determined to be a steadfast companion. After our marriage, Lucy resigned from her job. Several of her male coworkers expressed grief and resentment towards me, but by then, I had earned respect in the sales department, and no one dared to voice their complaints directly. Soon after our wedding, we discovered that Lucy was pregnant. We moved quickly, but Lucy was severely affected by morning sickness and found it challenging to manage household chores. I did my best to assist, but nothing I did seemed to satisfy her. The kind Lucy who used to praise me during our courtship had vanished. I kept telling myself that her behavior was solely due to the pregnancy, hoping she would revert to her former self once the morning sickness had passed. However, the reality was not that straightforward. When Hazel was born, the nights were arduous. Lucy would often say, "At least take care of her when you're home," and leave me with a crying Hazel after I returned late at night. On the few days I had off, I spent my time catching up on cleaning and laundry. Being young, I believed that postpartum women were delicate and required gentle treatment, as my parents from abroad had taught me. Despite my exhaustion, I persevered in supporting my family. Lucy often delegated household duties and childcare to me, but she never let me slack off at work. Thankfully, Hazel remained healthy, avoiding any major illnesses. Time passed quickly, and before long, nearly 30 years had gone by, yet my relationship with Lucy had significantly cooled. Nonetheless, I take pride in having given my all for my loved ones. When I was promoted to department head at my company 5 years ago, we even moved to a high-rise apartment, as Lucy had wished. After all, a department head at a prestigious firm is expected to reside in such a setting. For a time, Lucy seemed content, and we coexisted harmoniously. Regrettably, this peace was short-lived, and Lucy's attitude once again turned icy. She was willing to handle Hazel's chores, but refused to take on my share. The misery of performing household tasks with my weary, aging body was indescribable. Thoughts of divorce crossed my mind numerous times, but being constantly occupied and having Hazel nearby deterred me from following through. She speaks ill of me where I can overhear, casting unflattering remarks in my direction. "All right then, I'm off," I muttered quietly in the empty hallway the next early morning and left the house. For me now, work is where I feel most purposeful. After successfully completing the travel procedures and boarding the plane, I closed my eyes. My body felt heavy because I couldn't fall asleep easily last night. As I closed my eyes, yesterday's conversation between Lucy and Hazel echoed in my mind. "Ha, acting as if you've done nothing wrong with that holier-than-thou attitude. That's what I can't stand." Lucy started complaining as soon as I stepped out of the living room with my coffee. "Well, it's because of him working hard that we can enjoy our life, isn't it? I really wish you'd try to keep him in a good mood a bit more." Hazel, with a laugh in her voice, tried to calm Lucy down. When Hazel was young, she was attached to me, always calling Thad Dad. But as she hit puberty, she started to rebel against me. On the other hand, she seemed to gravitate towards Lucy, who wasn't much of a caretaker, but was fashionable and youthful. Lucy, indifferent to parenting, must find Hazel, who speaks sweetly, a more manageable partner compared to me, who can be nagging, especially when it comes to expensive decisions like high school or college enrollment. Hazel, more cunning than Lucy, cleverly navigated between the two of us to benefit herself. Initially troubled by Hazel's rebellious attitude, I was pleased when she became docile, but a certain event made me realize her true nature was twisted. I used to criticize Hazel for not finding a job after graduating from college, calling her activities bridal training while she just hung out. But now, I don't even feel like saying anything. Dad, do you know any good guys at your company? I wish to find someone reliable and wonderful like you, Hazel would occasionally say when I was home, almost like she was flattering me. Well, if I see someone promising, I'll introduce him to you. I'd respond with a smile, but my heart had grown cold. In the end, Hazel probably just wants someone convenient to leech off, just like Lucy does. One victim in this family is enough, so I've been dodging the issue, pretending to look around. You know, he never introduces any men to me. I'm already 28. I want to get married soon and become a graceful stay-at-home wife like you, Mom, Hazel would say. She's already in the midst of her elegant bridal training, isn't she? Well, boring guys like him are just a drag. Wouldn't recommend? They giggled together. But hey, if you want to have fun, there are plenty of ways to do that, right? Ah, Mom, really? Saying that in front of your daughter? They burst into uncontrollable laughter. I entered the room without making a sound, unnoticed by them. Ah, what am I going to do with those two? I thought. But they're my family, after all. I drank my coffee, feeling a sense of emptiness. The coffee was too bitter, keeping me from falling asleep easily. Before I knew it, I had arrived at my destination in Bangkok. It seems I had fallen asleep while deep in thought. Leaving the plane, I felt a sense of refreshment, a stark contrast to the heaviness I felt when leaving home. At the airport, I met up with the local staff who came to pick me up and was guided to the branch office. There, we discussed the details of this transaction. Thailand is a vital hub in Southeast Asia for our company, holding significant importance. On the final day of my trip, after smoothly progressing through negotiations and successfully concluding the contract, all that was left was my return home. A letter from Japan arrived at the hotel where I was staying. Why would they send it by mail when a call or email from the company would suffice, especially since it was addressed to me personally? Curious, I opened it to find a single piece of paper inside. Unfolding it, I saw that it was a divorce paper, signed and stamped by Lucy. Sending the papers all the way to Bangkok. Couldn't she have waited until I got back to Japan? Feeling frustrated, I decided to call Lucy anyway. Oh, how unusual. Did the post arrive by any chance? Lucy asked, her tone dripping with meaning. Yeah, the divorce papers did. What's this all about? I asked calmly. Lucy grinned and laughed. What do you think? I want a divorce. You've been neglecting the family so much that I've finally run out of patience, she declared triumphantly. Is that so? I responded. Lucy just laughed scornfully. I'm serious. Even our daughter agrees with the divorce, she rattled on, not giving me a chance to speak. So there you go. I'll be taking a hefty alimony. Thank you very much. It's all your fault for always disregarding the family. In the background, I could hear Hazel's voice. That's right, it's all Dad's fault. You better take responsibility, she said, berating me. This will make our lives easier. As I listened to their barrage of insults, Lucy burst out laughing. Come on, why so silent? Shocked at being dumped. Maybe he's crying over there. I quietly told them, Understood. Let's get a divorce. I'll give you everything I own. I promise. I'll also take the savings. You have no complaints, right? After all, I've supported you all this time, so you should be grateful and hand it over, Lucy said, and I could almost see her smirking over the phone. Understood. Let's proceed with that, I said. As I heard their triumphant laughter, I hung up the phone. Well, things are about to get busy, I muttered to myself and decided to get moving right away. Upon returning to Japan, I immediately submitted the divorce papers and completed all the necessary procedures. Feeling a sense of relief I hadn't felt in 30 years, I cracked open a beer, leaned back in the chair I'd brought out onto the deck, and enjoyed the pleasant breeze. A hum escaped me involuntarily. Then my cell phone rang loudly. Who's that? I thought, picking up the phone. Lucy's name flashed on the screen. "Hello," I answered, and immediately Lucy's hysterical screaming blasted through the line. "What do you think you're doing?" she yelled, her voice so loud it distorted the sound. "What do you mean? What do you think you're doing? What's going on?" I responded coolly. For a moment, all I could hear was her heavy breathing, as if she was out of breath. Something about a certificate of content arrived. She started speaking again, still panting. "Just as it says, due to the divorce, your infidelity has been uncovered, so I'm claiming compensation." "It's not just that, is it?" I said, my voice steady. Lucy's voice trembled. "Yeah, it includes the DNA test results that Hazel isn't my daughter, right? There's also evidence you tricked me into raising Hazel, so I'm asking for the return of all the child-rearing expenses I've incurred. If you're not willing, we'll go to court." "But I can't pay something like $300,000, she stammered. "Then why not have Hazel's real father pay? Seems fair, doesn't it?" "What were you talking about?" she stuttered. "Don't play dumb. I know everything. All of it," I said in a low voice, making Lucy gasp in fear. But he doesn't have that kind of money anymore. His ex-wife took everything. The savings, the retirement fund, everything." Her feeble excuse was as good as admitting Hazel had a different father. I was exasperated by Lucy's usual foolishness. "It's the former executive vice president Brown, right?" Lucy gasped on the other end of the phone. "I only found out about this recently myself. Surprised me too, to think that our matchmaker at our wedding was actually your lover, Lucy." Lucy groaned, but then, as if realizing something, asked, "Did you tell Brown's wife about this?" I was impressed Lucy caught on for once. "That's right. You catch on quick." I gathered all the evidence and informed his wife. "All this meddling is too much," she said, grinding her teeth, but there was nothing more Lucy could do. His wife was furious about the years of betrayal. Their son is a lawyer, and through his connections, they hired a top-notch attorney. "They managed to take almost all of his assets, didn't they?" I added. "Speaking of which, his wife mentioned she was going to sue you for damages as well." "What did you say?" Lucy screamed, and then there was the sound of rustling papers. This. It seemed she had also received a certified letter from Brown's wife, demanding $50,000 in damages. "I can't pay that." "Wow, that's $350,000 in total." "Impressive. Good luck with that. Hey, if you're short on cash, you could always sell some land." "Oh, that's right. The deed is in my name now, isn't it?" Lucy's voice brightened at my reminder. "That's right. It's all done. So I'm going to hang up now." After hanging up, I couldn't help but burst into laughter. About a year ago, I accidentally learned of Lucy's trickery and the truth about Hazel. As for my former boss, the ex-executive vice president Brown, I learned his secret when I was supposed to dine with a client at a restaurant. The client was running late by about an hour, and while waiting, I decided to get some coffee. As I turned around, I saw Lucy and Brown entering together. Brown was my boss, and Lucy, being from the same company, knew him well, especially since he was the matchmaker at our wedding. We've continued to send gifts for mid-year and year-end traditions without fail, but the way Lucy and Brown were together that time felt more intimate than just acquaintances. There was a strangely clingy vibe. I didn't say anything and immediately turned around, making sure they didn't notice me. Conveniently, they were seated at a table across from mine, separated by a pillar. I couldn't see them, but in the quiet restaurant, I could barely hear their voices. "Lucy, it's been a while." "Yes, I thought we could see each other more since you retired, but you never get in touch." Lucy's voice sounded petulant. My bad. When I was working, any excuse would do, but now that I'm at home, it's harder to find a reason to go out." I was confused. Brown must have retired last year, so why this sudden familiarity? Lucy's tone was so different, completely unlike the aloof attitude she usually showed me. "How's Hazel? Is she doing well?" Lucy asked, her voice warm. "Yes, she's really into K-pop idols lately, making a fuss about going to their concerts," Brown replied. Hearing Hazel's name, I couldn't help but listen more closely. "Is that so? No prospective husbands in sight?" Lucy continued, "Not at all. I keep telling George to introduce her to some promising young men, but that incompetent fool can't bring a single decent suitor," she spat out. "Did she just call me incompetent?" Brown laughed lightly, mocking me as well. "That's to be expected of him. He's not the type to think ahead. Raising someone else's child for 30 years without a hint of suspicion just shows how oblivious he is." Someone else's child? That phrase kept echoing in my mind, leaving me panicked. "It was right after George proposed to you, so I let my guard down," Brown continued. "But it's good George never doubted it. He believed she was his own." They laughed together, joyously. "I really want to tell everyone she's my daughter. My wife and I only had sons, so having a daughter later in life is special," Brown added. "I'm pleased to hear you say that. Hazel knows you're her real father and is proud of it," Lucy responded. "Is that so? If she wants anything, make sure she tells me." "I want my precious daughter to have the best," Brown said. "Let's go dine at a fancy restaurant together sometime soon," Lucy suggested, her tone wheedling, but I was far beyond caring. Hazel knows her real father and is proud of it. My vision darkened and cold sweat broke out. I felt faint, barely recalling the rest of their conversation. Somehow, I managed to leave the restaurant unnoticed and called my client to cancel our meeting, claiming I wasn't feeling well. The client apologized, concerned about my health. Strangers are far kinder, I found myself muttering. I've been betrayed by my former boss, my wife, and my daughter all along. I don't remember how I got home, but when I came to, I was lying on my bed. Neither Lucy nor Hazel had come home yet. As I stared up at the ceiling, I swore I would uncover the truth about Lucy and Brown. Hiring a private investigator didn't take long to confirm my suspicions. They were involved in an affair. Worse, it started even before she married me. Talking to someone who had retired, I learned their affair was quite well known back then. Then came the DNA test. When Hazel came home drunk and fell asleep in the living room, I secretly took a saliva sample. I felt utterly miserable, doubting the paternity of the daughter I had once cherished. But now, realizing she was just as deceitful as Lucy, my anger replaced any lingering affection. The results confirmed it. She wasn't my biological daughter. As I looked at the evidence of Lucy and Brown's infidelity and the DNA test results, I laughed. It was a dry, hollow laugh. "I'll use this evidence to drag them through the mud," I swore to myself. A year went by as I waited for the right moment. When Lucy lied about going to a hot spring with friends and instead went out with Brown, I didn't miss my chance. I contacted Brown's wife, revealing their affair with the evidence I had gathered. She turned pale as she examined the proof, but promised to fully cooperate with me. With the help of a top-notch lawyer and her son, we stripped Brown of everything. He was cast out, just as his wife had promised. "It's your turn now." I remember her words when I reported back to her 3 days later. Then Lucy called me again, her voice frantic. "What's the meaning of this?" she yelled. "What do you mean? What's the meaning of this?" "Maybe you should expand your vocabulary," I replied, exasperated. Lucy breathed heavily in frustration. "You transferred the deed to that land, that remote mountain. It's practically worthless. I talked to a real estate agent, and they said I'd lose money selling it. The maintenance fees and taxes are a nightmare." I calmly replied to her shrill protests. "You said you wanted everything I owned. I just made your wish come true. Thanks, by the way. That land from Grandpa was a burden, so you taking it off my hands really helped me out." After my sarcastic thanks, Lucy probably fell silent from sheer anger. Then I heard a voice shout, Mom, it's a disaster. Wait, Dad, is that you? The call switched to video chat, and Lucy's face looked furious while Hazel's was pale with shock. I just went to the bank to check our account, Mom. Calm down. There's less than $100 left. Lucy's jaw dropped. Dad, what's going on? Hazel glared at me. There's no money left because you all spent it, I replied calmly. Lucy glared at me, raising her voice. Take a good look. My paycheck gets deposited, right? But almost every month, it just disappears. And what about the bonuses? They went straight to your overseas trips, designer bags, and spa treatments. No way, that can't be true. But as Hazel looked at the bank statements, her expression said it all. She was dumbfounded. You know, George, Lucy continued, it's your job to take care of your wife and daughter. Yet, you haven't managed to save a single penny. You're utterly incompetent. I met her harsh words with a cold response. I haven't bought anything for myself since we got married. Everything was for you and Hazel. And what did I get in return? Betrayal and mockery. Why should I satisfy someone who treats me like that? Behind Lucy, I noticed Brown peeking out. It seemed he'd been there all along. Kicked out by his wife, he must have ended up at Lucy's place. George, long time, no see, Brown said, trying to sound calm, though he looked more disheveled than before. Long time no see, Mr. Brown, I replied firmly. His face twisted as I continued. After betraying people for so long, now you're kicked out, with no home or money. What do you want from me? Brown forced a smile. What's the matter, George? That's not like you. We're talking about the wife you've been with for 30 years and the daughter you cherish. Stop being petty and help them out, will you? His words made my blood boil. Help? Why should I? Why don't you help Lucy and Hazel if you care so much? Brown shrugged sadly. George, I'm just an old man now. My relationship with Lucy wasn't what you think. She was just helping me out. So please, with a generous heart, help Lucy and Hazel. And me too, in our time of need. I watched him, realizing he might have always been this shameless, but it was only now becoming clear. Just then, Hazel cried out, almost screaming, Dad, your daughter's in trouble. We can't even afford food. You stopped the credit card, remember? It's been unusable since yesterday. Then, Hazel, maybe you should work and support your real father, I replied coldly. What are you talking about? You're my father. Hazel shot back, her eyes fierce and determined. Didn't you say you'd rather have a rich executive as your father than someone incompetent like me? If that's the case, you should cherish that father you're so proud of, I said, trying to guide her to the truth. Hazel exploded. What are you talking about? Sure, I heard he was rich and had a fancy degree, but now he's just a broke, jobless old man. I don't need someone who can't even buy me anything. She started stomping and yelling, while Brown beside her looked petrified. Right, you transferred all your assets to Lucy, didn't you? Then this house belongs to her, she said. We could sell it and get a significant amount of money. Panicked, Brown blurted out, Yes, that's right. It's a high-rise luxury apartment. It might fetch around $1 million, right, Lucy? Hazel's anger vanished as she suddenly smiled. That's amazing. We're set for a while. Brown turned to me cheerfully. George, my apologies, but we're going to sell this condo you bought and use the money for living expenses and alimony payments. I enlightened him with a simple fact. What are you talking about? This condo was never in my name, so it doesn't belong to Lucy. Lucy was shocked. But that's not what you promised. You said you'd give me all your assets. I smiled. Yeah, that's why I transferred the ownership of those mountains to you. Plus, I gave you the furniture and appliances you bought for your hobbies, even though they were bought with my card. Those mountains are nothing but a nuisance, Lucy exclaimed, slumping to the floor. Then whose name is this condo under? Hazel demanded. At that moment, a man popped up beside me, causing Hazel and the others to scream. This is Kenny, my childhood friend and current employer. What employer? What are you talking about? Lucy asked, bewildered. I quit my job and am now in Bangkok, Thailand, I explained. Kenny's been running a company here and had invited me before. I never mentioned it because I knew you'd never approve. The first thing I thought after getting divorced and becoming free was that now I could work with Kenny. But what about this condo? Lucy pressed on. Kenny took over. Long time no see, Lucy. You might not remember me. We only met at the wedding. I bought this condo as an investment. I didn't want to rent it to just anyone, and when I heard George was looking for a place, I told him he could rent it cheaply while saving up to build his dream house after retirement. So that's why the condo is Kenny's, I added, watching as Lucy and the others looked disappointed, their plans to sell it thwarted. Kenny continued cheerfully, You'll probably hear from the real estate agent, but please move out by the end of this month. I rented it to George and his family, but now that you're divorced, Lucy, you're a stranger. And Hazel wasn't really his daughter, right? So I have no reason to rent the place to you. Lucy and the others started shouting at each other, hurling insults. It all stemmed from Mom making Dad angry. I told you to handle it better, I said. First, Brown told me to trick George into thinking Hazel was his child when I got pregnant. If you're going to deceive, at least keep it up until the end. You got caught because you were sloppy. It's your fault. The argument had become unpleasant and unbearable. If you want to debate, do it later. Pack your belongings now. I'm ending this call, I stated firmly. The trio glared at me. Then Lucy cried out, George, it was all a misunderstanding. It was an error. I only love you. When I was younger, this man deceived me. Hazel was a mistake, and I don't need her anymore. Let's pretend the divorce never happened. I'm a victim too, so let's go back to how things were. Please, I was just lonely and foolish. Hazel snatched the phone from Lucy. Dad, you're the only dad I have. You've always taken care of me. Don't listen to Mom. Let's live together, just the two of us. I'll show you your grandchildren someday. Can I come live with you too? Immediately, Brown chimed in. George, Bang is an excellent choice. Southeast Asia is booming. I'd love to work at that company too. Despite my age, my achievements speak for themselves. Please introduce me to your friend Kenny. The trio argued over the phone, trading insults back and forth. Kenny and I watched in disbelief, feeling overwhelmed. Finally, I quietly hung up the phone. The past decade had been a grueling journey for Kenny. With empathy, he acknowledged the challenges I had confronted in cutting ties with those who had caused me distress. As we clinked our chilled beers, a sense of relief washed over us, toasting to the newfound freedom that lay ahead. The real estate agent's directive had compelled Lucy and her companions to vacate the condo, despite their efforts to remain. Regrettably, her family had refused to provide them shelter, leaving them to wander between internet cafes. Brown's circumstances were even more dire, as his wife's powerful connections had obstructed his ability to secure employment or lodging. Ultimately, his desperation led to an unfortunate outburst, resulting in his arrest. As I reflected on these events, a sense of vindication emerged, tempered by the realization of the profound personal toll that betrayal and adversity can take. Ashamed, Lucy and Hazel vanished from the city without a trace, rumors swirling about them living in seclusion in the distant mountains. Since then, I've joined Kenny's company, and our sales have steadily climbed. The people here are kind, filling the void left by Lucy and Hazel. Sharing a beer with Kenny after work, discussing the business, and reminiscing has become my greatest joy, despite my fatigue. I'm deeply grateful for this change. Reflecting back, I see I'd wasted time due to misjudging people. But those lessons have taught me to treasure the wonderful company I now have. In the years ahead, I aim to cherish my relationships and time even more.
All right, everyone's presentations are done, Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick? Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children. With zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job. Having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike! What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. I didn't do anything wrong. You're still saying that? Look at him. Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract? Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go. Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him. There's no way he was pushed aside. Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he? I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.